Hello and welcome back to another evening together. Tonight we're going to do something a little different to what we've done before, and yet in another way it's exactly what we always do. We're going to spend the next couple of hours in the company of Dexter Morgan, not recapping seasons or arguing about which villain was the best or debating the ending, though I do have thoughts on all of that. No, tonight we're going to do something very specific. We're going to go through every single time Dexter Morgan should have died or been caught or had the whole carefully constructed life he built collapse around him. And we're going to take our time with it. I want to be upfront about what kind of video this is. It's not a countdown. It's not ranked or ordered by how close things got. It's more like a long walk through the show's seasons, stopping at the moments that matter, having a proper look at them, and appreciating what the writers were doing and what almost went wrong. Some of these are famous moments that every Dexter fan can quote. Some of them are quieter, a marina record, a phone call, a door left slightly open, that don't get talked about as much but are, in their own way, just as tense. Now, the thing about Dexter, and I think you already know this, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here, is that the show runs entirely on a specific kind of tension. Not action film tension, not jump scare tension. It's something quieter than that, and in some ways more unsettling. It's the tension of watching someone live a double life and knowing at some level that the math doesn't work, that eventually something has to give, that there are only so many close calls before the odds catch up. And yet they don't, or at least not in the way you might expect. What I want to do tonight is just go through it, season by season, moment by moment. Some of these are physical threats, someone with a gun or an axe or a very strong pair of hands. Some of them are investigative, a blood slide found in the wrong place, a marina camera in the wrong direction, a detective with the right instincts and the wrong luck. Some of them are relationship-shaped, someone who loves Dexter getting too close to a truth that would destroy both of them. There's quite a lot to get through, and I have no intention of rushing it. So if you're winding down, if you're getting comfortable, if you're settling in for a long one, this is a good night for it. And if you want to support what I do here, subscribing down below genuinely helps. I'd appreciate it. But for now, get cozy. Let's start at the very beginning. The first season of Dexter does something quietly remarkable. It establishes the rules of the show, the kill room, the code, the blood slides, the voiceover, the cheerful Miami backdrop against which all the darkness is set, and then, almost immediately, it starts testing every single one of those rules. And it does it through two very different threats arriving at the same time from completely opposite directions. Worth pausing on the code for a moment, actually, because it's the foundation of everything that either protects Dexter or fails to protect him throughout the whole series. Harry Morgan, his adoptive father and a Miami Metro detective, recognized very early that the boy he'd taken in was going to kill people. There wasn't a version of Dexter's future that didn't involve that. So rather than trying to prevent it, which Harry seems to have concluded was impossible, he tried to channel it. He taught Dexter two primary rules: only kill people who have killed others and escape justice and never get caught. The code is essentially a contract between Dexter and the darkness inside him. You can feed it, but only under very specific conditions. The clever thing the show does with the code is use it as a source of tension rather than a source of safety. Because the code is a set of rules developed by a grieving, overwhelmed detective trying to do something impossible with a traumatized child, and it has gaps and contradictions and pressure points that the show spends 8 seasons finding. Every near miss in the series is, at some level, a stress test of the code. Does it hold? Does it protect him? Does following it actually make him less visible, or does it just make him feel better about what he does? The first threat you probably remember. It's James Dokes. Dokes is introduced in the first episode, and from the very first scene between them, there's something different about how he looks at Dexter. Every other person at Miami Metro either likes Dexter or is fairly indifferent to him. He's the donut guy. He's harmless. He's funny in a slightly odd way. Sergeant Batistu's got a soft spot for him. Deborah thinks the world of him. Laguerre tolerates him, and Dokes watches him from across the room with this expression that I can only describe as controlled suspicion. Like a dog that's picked up a scent, it doesn't quite have a name for it yet. Dexter's own internal monologue nails why this is significant. He asks himself why, in a building full of homicide detectives, people professionally trained to read human behavior, to detect inconsistencies, to notice when something doesn't add up, Dokes is the only one who gives him the creeps. It's a good question. And the answer the show offers is one of the more interesting bits of character writing in the early seasons. Dokes is a former Army Ranger operator. He's conducted operations in places where the rules were, to put it diplomatically, extremely flexible. He knows what it looks like when someone has taken a life and feels something about it that they shouldn't. Not guilt, necessarily, something else, a kind of orientation toward death that most people don't have. And when he looks at Dexter, he sees the shape of that quality, even if he can't name it, even if he can't prove it. The Miami Metro Department also works as a very specific context for all of this. Everyone else in that building is fundamentally social. They work in proximity, they go to the same bars after shifts, they have personal dramas that bleed into the professional space. Dexter navigates all of that through performance. He knows the right things to say, the right tone to take, the right amount of donut enthusiasm to deploy. He's learned over years exactly how to appear to be a person without being one. And in a social environment like a homicide department, where everyone knows everyone and the relational textures are thick, that performance is both easier and harder. Easier because there's lots of information to cue off. Harder because sustained intimacy tends to reveal things that passing acquaintance doesn't. Dokes is immune to the performance. He doesn't like Dexter, doesn't want Dexter's goodwill, and therefore doesn't accept the cues Dexter offers. He simply watches. So from the end of season 1, Dokes is following Dexter, not officially, not with a warrant or a case number, just watching. Noting the late nights, clocking the oddities, asking pointed questions in the hallway. And Dexter, who has spent years building a performance of total normalcy, has to run the performance at a higher resolution whenever Dokes is near. It's exhausting to watch, frankly, and it's only going to get worse. But let's talk about the other threat in season 1, because this one is stranger and more personal and takes a while to reveal itself fully. Someone is leaving Dexter messages. The ice truck killer, Miami's most prominent new serial killer, whose calling card is bloodless, surgically precise dismemberments, is not just killing people. He's communicating, and the messages are specific. They reference Dexter's childhood, his methods, his psychology, the kinds of details that can't be found in any police file because they're not in any police file. Whoever is doing this doesn't just know about Dexter the forensics analyst. They know about Dexter the other thing. The escalation of this is handled really well. It starts with just an eerie awareness, crime scenes that seem tailored to unsettle Dexter specifically. Then a blood slide appears with a smiley face etched into it. Then the messages get more direct, and Dexter, who spends his whole life managing the sensation of being unseen, suddenly feels very, very seen. And not by someone who wants to turn him in, by someone who seems to admire what they see. The blood slide with the smiley face is worth slowing down on. Dexter's slides are his trophies, a single drop from each victim, a record of the kills he's made. They live in a box in the air conditioning unit of his apartment. Nobody is supposed to know they exist. The fact that someone has left him one in his own method with his own iconography, marked with a childlike smiley face that suggests both familiarity and a certain kind of dark affection, is alarming in a very specific way. Whoever left it wasn't threatening him. They were waving, "Hello, I see you, I know what you collect. And I want to play." Dexter dumps his boat's entire kit overboard. He clears out evidence, he prepares to go to ground, and then he keeps investigating because the alternative, letting the ice truck killer keep going while Dexter hides, isn't something the code allows. He needs to find out who this is and deal with it, even knowing that whoever it is already knows far too much. The ice truck killer turns out to be Brian Moser, and Brian Moser is Dexter's biological brother. Let me back up a little, because to understand what that revelation means, you need to understand Dexter's origin. Both boys were present the night their mother, Laura Moser, was murdered in a shipping container by drug cartel members. Dexter was around 3 years old. He sat in his mother's blood for 2 days before being found. Harry Morgan, a Miami Metro detective, found him, adopted him, and raised him. Brian was slightly older and was not taken by Harry. He went into the foster system, eventually into institutional care, and he became what he became. Harry knew Brian existed. He never told Dexter. So when Dexter finds out, when the ice truck killer removes his mask, metaphorically speaking, and Dexter realizes he's been corresponding with his own brother, the emotional weight of it is genuinely strange to sit with. Brian isn't threatening Dexter, he's offering him something. He's offering him the idea that Dexter doesn't have to pretend to be something he's not, that they can exist together honestly, that the code and the performance and all the exhausting work of appearing normal can just stop. And Dexter is tempted, not in a simple way, not in a way he can easily dismiss. He's tempted in the way you're tempted by a thing you've wanted for a long time but convinced yourself you don't deserve. But then Brian takes Deborah. He kidnaps Deb and sets her up as a kill, strapped down, prepared, staged as a gift for Dexter. The offer is this: Dexter has to let Deb die. If he really is what Brian believes him to be, if the code and Harry's teachings are just a cage and not a genuine expression of who he is, then Deb is just an obstacle. Brian even frames it as liberation. Step over her and be free. The staging of it is very deliberate. Brian uses the same method with his victims, all that careful, bloodless preparation. He's given Deb the same treatment, the same care, as if to say, she matters enough to do it right. It's meant to be a compliment. It's deeply awful. And it puts Dexter in the exact position that every subsequent season will find new ways to put him in, forced to choose between who he is and who he loves. Dexter saves her. And then there's the final confrontation. Brian goes to Deb's apartment, the one place he knows he'll find a target, and walks into a trap that Dexter has set. Dexter strangles him unconscious, transports him, and puts him on a kill table in a mirror of how Brian staged his own victims. The apartment where Brian worked is neat, methodical, everything in order. Dexter has recreated the setup. It's his brother's aesthetics turned on Brian himself, and they talk. Brian tries one last time. He says Dexter is choosing to live a lie for people who will never truly know him, never truly love the real version of him. And he's not entirely wrong. Dexter knows he's not entirely wrong. The argument Brian makes that the code is a cage, that Harry's love was conditional on Dexter's compliance, that Deb's love is for a version of Dexter that doesn't fully exist. These are arguments that Dexter can't entirely defeat, even as he prepares to do what the code requires. But Dexter slices his throat anyway. He stages it as a suicide using Brian's own methods. He collapses and cries afterward, which is one of the more surprisingly human moments of the first season. And then he goes back to Miami Metro the next day and carries donuts and smiles, and Dokes watches him from across the room. The interesting thing about Season 1's near misses is that none of them are quite as close as they first appear. Dokes suspects but can't prove anything. Brian knows but chooses to reach out rather than expose. The danger is always mediated by someone wanting something from Dexter rather than simply wanting to destroy him. That changes significantly in the seasons that follow. And Dokes is very much still watching. Season 2 opens with Dexter unable to kill. It's a small, quiet detail that sets the tone for everything that follows. He's got a target, a voodoo priest who has been poisoning people, and when the man is on the table, Dexter just Can't. He lets him go. He goes bowling instead. For weeks after killing his brother, something in Dexter's mechanism has stopped working, and the darkness that normally feels like a relief when released is sitting still inside him, going nowhere. This is the emotional backdrop for everything that happens next. Because what happens next is genuinely structurally alarming. Ocean divers doing a routine survey off the coast of Miami come across debris, garbage bags, dozens of them. And inside the bags are dismembered human remains, 30-some bodies accumulated over years. Dexter's entire underwater graveyard suddenly visible to the surface world. The Bay Harbor Butcher is no longer a theoretical bogeyman. He has a body count, and now the FBI has evidence. Special Agent Frank Lundy arrives in Miami. He's thorough, experienced, methodical, and good at his job in a way that the Miami Metro detectives, much as I love them, frequently are not. He sets up a task force. He starts building a profile. He's looking for patterns in the kills, trying to understand who the Bay Harbor Butcher is, what they want, what their operational logic is. And Dexter, who works in the same building, is assigned to help analyze the evidence. His own trophies, in a sense. He's literally cataloging himself, telling FBI technicians which slides to test and which to set aside, running the forensics on his own murders. He gets to sit in the task force meetings and hear about himself from an outside perspective, which is both useful. He can steer the investigation away from inconvenient conclusions and deeply strange to experience. Lundy discusses the killer's psychology, his apparent vigilantism, his method, his pattern. And Dexter's taking notes. There's a subplot running through all of this that doesn't get enough attention in most discussions of Season 2, which is the NA storyline. Dexter, needing a cover story for his increasingly erratic behavior and unexplained absences, presents himself to Rita as a drug addict entering recovery. He joins a Narcotics Anonymous group. He tells Rita that the darkness inside him, the thing that makes him disappear at night, that makes him distracted and unavailable and strange, is addiction. Rita accepts this, and she shouldn't entirely because Rita was married to a genuine addict. Paul Bennett was a violent, serious drug user who destroyed her life and her children's lives, and she has first-hand knowledge of what addiction looks like from the inside of a family. And yet she accepts Dexter's story. The show leans on this somewhat, using it to keep the cover going, though it also uses it to reveal something interesting about Dexter. That the NA meetings, the community, the act of sharing something genuine about the darkness inside him, even framed as addiction rather than what it actually is, provides him with something real. There's a scene where he speaks at a meeting and describes his dark passenger, and everyone in the room thinks he's talking about compulsive behavior and substance use, and he's clearly talking about something quite different. And the response he gets, the empathy, the recognition, is something he's never received for the real thing. It's unexpectedly moving and also a little heartbreaking. Anyway, Lundy is getting closer. The algae diatoms, the marina profiles, the body count. His profiling work is genuinely impressive, and Dexter knows it. And that could have been almost funny in a very dark way, except that Dokes is paying attention to all of it. Dokes watched Dexter relentlessly until his death. But now there's an active investigation into a serial killer, and Dokes has this nagging, shapeless feeling that he knows exactly who it is. He starts following Dexter in earnest, real surveillance, off the clock, noting the boat trips, the late nights, the patterns. The marina becomes a problem around this time. Miami Metro figures out that the Bay Harbor Butcher almost certainly keeps a boat somewhere nearby because of algae diatoms found in the bags that can be traced to a specific harbor. They put a surveillance camera on Coral Cove Marina, which is where Dexter has had his slip for years. He eventually figures out the camera is there, and he spends one very uncomfortable night cleaning his boat with a black light, knowing that any footage of him at that marina at odd hours is already in someone's file. He moves his boat to a different marina 8 months before his lease at Coral Cove runs out. It's the kind of detail that looks innocent in isolation and looks extremely suspicious in context. And LaGuire 2, later in the series, will find that marina record and notice the early departure. The breadcrumbs never really disappear, they just get buried under other things. But the moment that Season 2 will always be remembered for comes in the Everglades. Dexter's at his cabin, a remote location out in the swamp. But he's been dismembering and bagging bodies in his kill rooms before disposing of them from his boat out at sea. He has a body with him, the remains of Jose Garza. He's in the middle of the process. It's dark, it's quiet. And then James Dokes steps out of the tree line with a gun. Dokes has put a GPS tracker on Dexter's boat. He's followed him here. He has him completely, undeniably red-handed. There is no cover story available. There are no forensics to reinterpret. There are no colleagues to redirect. It's just Dokes and a gun, and a man standing over dismembered remains, and Dokes says the only thing that makes sense to say, "What's it gonna be, Morgan? Kill me now or set me free." The fight is fast. Dokes shoots Dexter just a graze on the thigh, but still, Dexter takes a bullet, and then Dexter gets the angle, puts him in a sleeper hold, and hauls him unconscious into the cabin, and then locks him in the cage. Just think about that. The cage where Santos Jimenez had been storing a drug dealer's cocaine, Ayler's cocaine. Now it's holding the one cop in Miami who always knew. What follows is one of the stranger stretches of the show. Dokes in the cage, Dexter tending his leg wound, the two of them having this surreal, ongoing argument through the bars. Dokes says Dexter's going to have to kill him, and Dexter says he doesn't want to do that. And Dokes says that's a lie, and Dexter says it's not, and round they go. Dokes is in a cage, and he still won't stop. He's furious and correct and completely trapped, and somehow still managing to be the most intimidating presence in the room. Which is honestly impressive. The arguments they have in that cabin are worth dwelling on because their genuine Dokes says Dexter is a killer, but insists he is different, and that the killings he's done in the line of duty are not the same as what Dexter does, tells himself. Dexter pushes back. Dokes has more officer-related shootings than anyone else. George King likes it, Dexter says. Dexter says. The code is a frame that makes Dexter feel like his killing has a function, but underneath it is something that both of them recognize in each other. The conversation keeps circling this point without resolving it. And the reason it doesn't resolve is that Dexter is to some degree right about Dokes, and Dokes is entirely right about Dexter, and neither of them can quite say that cleanly. Dexter has to decide what to do with him. He can't let him go. Dokes goes straight to Lundy. He can't kill him without it raising questions that would make the investigation worse, not better. A dead Dokes who is hunting the Bay Harbor butcher puts a very specific spotlight on the people around Dokes' investigation. So he brings food and argues through the bars and waits, trying to find a third option that doesn't exist. Meanwhile, in Miami, the investigation Lundy's task force finds what they think is a breakthrough, slides found in Dokes' car at the airport, hidden there by Dokes after he stole them from Dexter, while Dexter has been very quietly steering things in Dokes' direction. And the official theory becomes James Dokes is the Bay Harbor butcher. He's fled the country. The manhunt begins. The specific mechanics of how Dexter plants the slides and how Dokes' background is used to make the theory credible is worth appreciating. Dexter doesn't manufacture evidence out of nothing. He uses real facts, real connections, real aspects of Dokes' personality and history, and frames them in a way that tells a coherent story. Dokes' special forces background, his multiple officer-involved shootings, his known hostility toward certain suspects, his trips to Haiti to investigate specific cases, all of it is woven into a profile that reads as the profile of a cop who became a vigilante. Because stripped of the specifics, that is kind of what Dokes is. The story fits because it's built on true things. It's probably the most technically accomplished piece of frame-up work Dexter does in the whole series. And it's entirely invisible to everyone except LaGuertu, who refuses to accept it. And Dexter is standing in the evidence room listening to all of it, being asked to run the forensics on the theory of his own innocence. The only person who doesn't accept the Dokes theory is LaGuertu. Muhriu LaGuertu, who has been Dokes' partner and friend for years, refuses to believe it. She keeps quiet about it, mostly, but she calls Dokes on his reactivated phone, and he sees it ringing, and he ignores it as he heads off to find proof. To find proof. That's the last time they speak. Back at the cabin, the situation resolves itself in a way Dexter did not choose and cannot fully control. Leela West, his Narcotics Anonymous sponsor, a thoroughly chaotic person who has become obsessed with Dexter in a way that is not healthy for anyone involved, steals his GPS device after Deborah threatens her with deportation. She follows the signal to the Everglades. She finds the cabin. She finds Dokes in the cage. And Dokes tells her everything. He tells her Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher. Lila's response to this information is remarkable in how wrong it is. She doesn't unlock the cage. She doesn't call the police. She doesn't even seem particularly alarmed. What she feels, apparently, is that Dexter having this enormous secret is something she can connect to on a deep level, and that her love for him, which has become increasingly untethered from anything resembling reality, means her job here is to protect him. She turns on a gas hob. She opens the propane valve. And she walks away. The cabin explodes. Dokes dies in the blast, along with the dismembered remains of Garza. When investigators arrive, the theory writes itself. Dokes, cornered and about to be caught, blew himself up. Masuka even argues it would be strange for a man as capable as Dokes to make such a basic error, leading to the suggestion that it might have been deliberate, suicide essentially, rather than capture. The Bay Harbor Butcher case is Offie Dexter is the butcher is the butcher. The FBI packs up and goes home. Dexter knows it was Lila. He meets her at the aquarium. He tells her that he's like her, no emotions, nothing inside. He lets her believe they're going to run. And then he goes to Paris and kills her in her apartment or on a terrace. This is worth sitting with for a moment. Lila is the first person after Brian who knew the full truth of Dexter's situation, knew about the Bay Harbor Butcher, knew about Dokes, knew what happened at that cabin. And she had to be dealt with. Brian was killed because he would have killed Deb. Lila is killed because she's a liability who has already committed at least 2 murders and will, Dexter calculates correctly, always be a threat to the life he's trying to build. The code technically doesn't cover Lila, but Dexter is both the judge and the jury in his own system, and when the alternative is too dangerous, they kills her in Paris with a knife, in her apartment, on a terrace. Very French, in a very grim way. Something else worth noting about Season 2 is how cleanly Lundy's investigation was wound down. He's a genuinely good investigator, and had circumstances been different, had Dokes not been framed, had Lila not created a convenient resolution, he would have kept pulling. Lundy comes back in Season 4, briefly, before he's killed by Christine Hill. And even in his second appearance, running a cold case investigation, you get the sense of what he was capable of if he'd been pointed at the right target with enough time. He never quite is. But he comes close enough twice that his absence from the show is one of those things you notice. Every season without Lundy is a season where Dexter's biggest investigative threat isn't in the room. The thing that always gets me about Season 2 is just how many separate systems were closing in simultaneously. The FBI, Dokes, the marina surveillance, the algae diatoms. Lundy's profile work getting tighter. If any single one of those threads had pulled slightly differently, if Lila hadn't stolen the GPS, if Dokes had managed to get a message out from the cage, if LaGuertu had been listened to rather than dismissed, the whole thing falls apart right there. It doesn't though, and that's the show. Season 3 is In relative terms, a quieter season for Dexter in terms of the walls closing in. The Bay Harbor butcher case is buried, Dokes is dead, Lundy has gone back to wherever EFBI agents go between investigations. For the first time in a while, Dexter is not being actively hunted by anyone, which means, of course, that the danger has to come from somewhere else. And it comes, characteristically, from Dexter himself, specifically from Dexter wanting something he shouldn't want. The season starts with a mistake, a real one, not a procedural one. Dexter's in the middle of a planned kill, he has a target, he's done his research, he's ready, when a second person interrupts. Oscar Prado is in the wrong place, he panics, there's a confrontation, and Dexter ends up killing Oscar in what is genuinely more self-defense than anything else. Not planned, not code compliant, just a man who walked into the wrong room at the wrong moment. The problem is that Oscar's brother is Miguel Prado, assistant district attorney. Connected, ambitious, sharp, and grieving in a way that makes him very attentive to details that don't quite line up. He starts pulling threads, he and Dexter circle each other for a while, and then, in one of those moments that Harry would have called catastrophically unwise, Dexter decides to let Miguel in. This is the thing about Season 3 that I find genuinely interesting. Dexter isn't careless here, he's lonely. He has Rita, he has Deborah, he has a functioning social life by any external measure, but there is nobody in his life who knows what he is and chooses to be there anyway. That's an isolation that the show has always treated as Dexter's fundamental condition, and Miguel offers, for the first time since Brian, the possibility of a genuine peer, someone who can know the truth and still be his friend. And for a while it works. They kill together or adjacent sometimes. Miguel presents cases and Dexter handles them, or handles them. It feels briefly like something sustainable. Then Miguel starts expanding his definition of what deserves to die. He kills Ellen Wolfe, an attorney, because she's made his professional life difficult. Not because she's escaped justice, not because she's a predator, because she's inconvenient. And Dexter realizes he's created something he has absolutely no control over, a person who now knows exactly who and what Dexter is, and who has decided that knowledge is a blank check. Miguel knows too much to ignore, and he's dangerous enough that ignoring him would be genuinely foolish. The specific problem with Miguel isn't that he's powerful or connected, though he is both. The problem is that the thing Dexter gave him, the knowledge, the trust, the friendship built around shared violence, has given Miguel a framework for self-justification that he's using in completely uncontrolled ways. He believed coming in that Dexter's code was genuine moral architecture, a way of thinking about justice that was cleaner and more honest than the legal system. And then he discovered that he could adopt that framework and apply it to whatever he wanted, because Dexter couldn't publicly challenge him without exposing himself. It's a very specific kind of being held hostage. Dexter has to watch Miguel commit what are, by the code's own standards, completely unjustifiable kills. And he can't say anything in any public forum because the alternative is mutual destruction. Every argument he makes to Miguel has to be private, has to operate entirely on Miguel's goodwill, which Miguel is rapidly spending. There's a smaller threat running parallel to all of this that I think is worth mentioning. Dexter's doing surveillance on a man named Kenny, the Tooth Fairy killer, as part of his work toward a kill. He ends up driving Kenny somewhere, and Kenny, who has run Dexter's plates or had someone run them, pulls a gun in the car. He tells Dexter he knows he works for homicide, and that means the situation has only one obvious resolution from Kenny. Dexter's response is to accidentally crash the car off the road. Chain-link fence. Just drive straight into it. The airbags deploy, Kenny is incapacitated, and Dexter walks out of the situation. It's such a Dexter solution. Not elegant, not the plan he had in mind, but functional in a very immediate way. He improvises well under sudden physical danger. That quality is going to matter a lot more in later seasons. Meanwhile, at the edges of the season, there's the Skinner. George King, who has been skinning people alive for information about a drug dealer named Freebo, a drug dealer Dexter killed earlier. King is working his way through everyone connected to Freebo, and Deborah's investigation keeps brushing up against the same people. Dexter is aware that King is methodically moving through a list that will eventually get to him. What makes the Skinner a distinct kind of threat is the method. Skinning people alive for information is not a subtle process. King is not trying to stay hidden, he's trying to extract information before he can be stopped, which means he moves quickly and leaves traces. Deborah's investigation is essentially running alongside Dexter's without them quite connecting. She's following a trail that leads toward the same conclusion Dexter has already reached, and the closer she gets, the more Dexter has to manage the overlapping nature of his official investigation and his private one. Anton Briggs, Deb's boyfriend at the time, is taken by the Skinner, which makes the whole situation significantly more personal and significantly more complicated for Dexter to navigate. Now there's an emotionally urgent missing person case pulling Deb's attention and energy in a direction that has direct relevance to Dexter's private problem. And he can't explain why he knows what he knows or has the information he has. The Skinner never quite becomes the direct threat that other antagonists are, but there's a sustained low-level pressure there that goes along with everything else. Dexter kills Miguel eventually. He strangles him and frames another criminal for it. He also kills the Skinner in a direct confrontation. There's a fight, and George King doesn't win it. And the season ends with Dexter and Rita getting married, Rita pregnant with Harrison, things looking about as settled as they ever get. There's something worth noting about how the wedding scene plays. It's genuinely warm, in the specific way Dexter warmth works, which is to say that the performance is so good you almost forget it's a performance. Rita is happy, the kids are there, Masuku is there in a great suit. Dexter gives a speech that is, against all odds, touching, and Dexter himself in the voiceover acknowledges something that he doesn't usually acknowledge, that he wants this, that the thing he's built with Rita and her family is not entirely simulation, that something in him has genuinely attached, which makes what happens in season 4 hit considerably harder, but we'll get to that. The lesson of season 3, if Dexter is ever in the habit of learning lessons, which is debatable, is that the most dangerous thing in the world is telling someone your secret and hoping they'll stay who they were before they knew it. They don't. People change when they have that kind of power over another person. Some of them use it generously. Miguel used it the way a lot of people would, which is to say, in a way that S. Bryan was the second person who knew. And Miguel Prado was not the second person to know Dexter's secret, was the second. Neither of them ended well. I've always thought that season 4 is where Dexter stops being a show about a man successfully managing a double life and starts being a show about a man whose double life is slowly destroying everything around him. It's disguised as a cat and mouse thriller, Dexter versus Arthur Mitchell, the Trinity Killer, John Lithgow doing one of the most genuinely terrifying pieces of television acting you'll ever see. But what the season is really about is consequences, the kind that pile up quietly, one at a time, until one day you come home and find your wife in a bathtub. But let's start with Arthur. Arthur Mitchell has been killing in a specific ritualistic cycle, for Arthur Mitchell's cycle consists of 4 kills that repeat. Lone of Arthur Mitchell's kill methods is a bathtub, femoral artery, slitting, tub drowning, a fall from a height, a bludgeoning. He does charitable work. He builds houses for families, he leads a church group, he appears from every external angle to be a pillar of his community, a family man, a man of faith, a man who has found a way to live with whatever is inside him and still build something that looks like a normal life. And that's exactly why Dexter becomes obsessed with him rather than simply killing him. Dexter has a baby, he has a wife, he has a step family and a job and a house in the suburbs. And he desperately wants to believe that those things are compatible with what he is, that you can be both, that the code and the darkness and the real world can all be held together without one eventually consuming the others. And here's Arthur Mitchell, 30 years in, apparently managing exactly that. So Dexter doesn't kill him immediately, he studies him. He follows him under the alias Kyle Butler. He watches how Arthur moves through his family, through his charity work, through his daily life. He's looking for the manual, the proof that it's possible. And what he finds gradually is that the manual doesn't exist. Arthur Mitchell is not managing his double life. He's being consumed by it. His family is terrified of him. His wife Sally is trapped in a dynamic that has its own specific gravity. She can't leave because Arthur won't let her. And the control he exerts over the household is constant and suffocating and occasionally violent. His children, Jonah and Rebecca, have grown up in the presence of something they can't name but can feel. There's no happiness in the Mitchell household. There's compliance and fear, and a practiced performance of normalcy that falls apart any time the pressure changes. Dexter sees this and it should change the calculus. It doesn't, not immediately. He's too invested in the possibility that Arthur's life represents. He keeps watching, he keeps following, he keeps pushing the kill back one more day, one more week. Meanwhile, the 4-kill cycle keeps going. A bathtub drowning, a fall from height, a bludgeoning. And then Dexter only discovers this later in the season, a burial. A 10-year-old boy taken 5 days before the bathtub murder, used as part of a pattern that echoes Arthur's own childhood trauma. The cycle isn't 3 kills, it's 4. And Dexter, who thought he understood his target, has been missing something fundamental. The first major near miss of the season is investigative rather than physical. Arthur, who is perceptive in ways that initially seem impossible given how well his facade holds, puts things together faster than Dexter expects. The alias Kyle Butler stops being safe. Arthur learns that Kyle Butler is actually Dexter Morgan. He finds a listing in the white pages. He's at his computer in his garage looking him up, and he starts to cackle, not laugh, cackle, in a way that really communicates how badly wrong this is about to go. What follows is a particularly stressful sequence. Dexter has Arthur drugged and locked in his van in a parking garage. He's planning to deal with the situation imminently, and then a completely unrelated altercation happens, a traffic dispute in the garage, an escalating confrontation, Dexter's frustration boiling over badly enough that he grabs someone's phone and throws it on the ground, and 2 county sheriff's deputies arrest him. So Dexter is sitting in a county jail cell, and Arthur Mitchell is in the van in the parking garage, slowly regaining consciousness. The distance between locked up and waiting for professional courtesy to get him out, and Arthur wakes up and is gone, is not a comfortable distance at all. The tension of that particular stretch is very real. He's released due to overcrowding. He runs back to the garage. Arthur is gone. There's a period after this where Arthur knows who Dexter is, and Dexter knows that Arthur knows, and they're circling each other very carefully, each one aware that the other could end everything. Arthur calls, he goes looking for Dexter, oaking for Rita. He finds Deb's address by mistake first, goes through her mail, finds her name, realizes this is the wrong Morgan, and corrects it. There's this moment when he's standing in Deb's apartment, furious, throwing her mail across the room. And Deb is fine only because she happened to be Deborah Morgan rather than Rita Morgan, and that particular clerical error bought everyone one more day. Arthur eventually finds the right address. He's patient in a way that speaks to 30 years of practice. A man who has maintained a triple life that long has had every urgency trained out of him. He doesn't rush. He waits. He gathers what he needs. Meanwhile, Dexter is trying to manage the situation from multiple directions. He needs to kill Arthur. He also needs to make sure that when Arthur dies, nothing leads back to Kyle Butler, which means managing the evidence trail of his own investigation. He needs to get Rita and Harrison and the kids out of the line of fire without telling Rita why. He's also dealing with his own arrest at the county jail and the subsequent professional fallout. which involves covering up why he was at a parking garage at that particular moment with that particular purpose. The irony, and the show lands this quite well, is that Dexter is probably the only person in Miami who could have caught Arthur Mitchell. He knew about the 4-kill cycle before Miami Metro did. He knew Arthur's real name, his charity connection, his family situation. He had everything he needed to both catch Arthur and kill him. And he didn't act on it because he was too busy wanting to be Arthur, wanting to believe that what Arthur's life appeared to be was a thing that could exist. The season also has Lockware to continuing to chip away at the fringes of the Bay Harbor butcher case, but it's mostly running quietly in the background here. The central pressure is Arthur, and Arthur eventually gets dealt with. There's also the matter of Quinn putting together a surveillance operation on Dexter, not through official channels, just through his own suspicion that something doesn't add up about the man his sergeant keeps looking at. Quinn hires someone, he watches. He doesn't get far in season 4, but the seed of it carries forward. The specific quality of the Trinity threat that makes it different from everything that came before is the patience of it. Arthur has been doing this for 30 years, which means he is extremely good at not getting caught. And the skills involved in not getting caught for 30 years as a serial killer have significant overlap with the skills involved in identifying when someone is watching you and what they want. He clocks that Kyle Butler is not who Kyle Butler says he is. He figures out there's a parallel investigation happening, and he decides that the most effective response is to find out who Kyle Butler actually is rather than run. So Arthur's tracking Dexter while Dexter is tracking Arthur. 2 men running parallel investigations on each other, both pretending they're not doing it, both aware the other one knows something is wrong. It's a genuinely uncomfortable dynamic that the season executes well, partly because John Lithgow plays Arthur with this quality of still water that's absolutely unsettling. He's never loud, he's never theatrical, he's just always slightly more informed than Dexter expects him to be. In the finale, The Getaway, Dexter finds Arthur, kills him, takes a blood slide. The code is executed. It's over. He calls his family, they're at a hotel in the Keys. Harrison sounds good, Rita sounds happy. He tells her he loves her and he means it in whatever way Dexter means things. He goes home. The apartment is quiet. He hears Harrison crying. He follows the sound to the bathroom. She's been killed the same way Arthur killed his second victim in every cycle. The bathtub bleed out, the second beat of his pattern. Harrison is on the floor in her blood, sitting exactly as Dexter once sat in his mother's blood in a shipping container. Arthur, before Dexter reached him, had come for Rita. The near miss here isn't Dexter nearly dying. It's the thing that happens when the near misses finally stop being near misses. It's the bill coming due for all those months of watching instead of acting. Rita's death is the show saying very plainly, the double life has a cost, and eventually that cost is paid by the people who don't know what they're standing next to. And Dexter, who picked Harrison up from the blood, who has no idea how to grieve in any conventional sense, who stands in an empty bathtub at the end of the episode and feels something he can't name, Dexter carries that forward into everything that follows. It changes the mathematics of every close call that comes after. Season 5 starts in grief, which is appropriate, and stays in a kind of low-level, exhausted tension for most of its run. Dexter is a single father now. He's trying to hold Harrison's life together while also trying to hold his own together, and the two things are not obviously compatible. He meets Lumen Pierce, a survivor of a ring of men who kidnapped, assaulted, and killed women. And the season becomes, among other things, a story about 2 damaged people helping each other do something terrible and finding something almost like peace in it. Lumen is one of the more interesting characters the show ever produced, and Julia Stiles does excellent work with her. She's not a natural killer. She is someone who has been broken open by a specific experience of violence and who cannot close back into who she was before it. The men who hurt her are still out there. She has their faces memorized, and she has decided in a very clear-eyed way that she cannot move forward into any version of her future while those men are still alive. Dexter could just do it for her. He offers essentially to handle it. And Lumen says no, she needs to be part of it. She needs to look them in the face. She needs to be there when it happens. So they work together, and the partnership is strange and uncomfortable and occasionally moving. Dexter finds himself explaining the code to someone for the first time from the inside, describing what it feels like and why it works the way it works, and in doing so discovers things about it and about himself that the voiceover alone never quite gets to. But the near-death moments in Season 5 are, in their way, some of the most pragmatic of the whole show. There's no grand villain with a god complex, no federal investigation pulling threads. The threat that comes closest to ending everything is a disgraced cop with a camcorder and a financial incentive. Stan Liddy. Liddy is a former Miami Metro officer dismissed from the force for a transgression that's never entirely spelled out. And he's been hired by Quinn, who has his own suspicions about Dexter, to conduct informal surveillance. Liddy is good at this. He is methodical, he is patient, and he is motivated by the very concrete prospect of a bounty if he can bring Quinn something usable. He starts photographing Dexter carrying black garbage bags onto his boat late at night. He's sitting in a car with a camera and he's building a file, one image at a time. Dexter becomes aware gradually that someone is watching him. There's that particular instinct he's honed over years, the way the hairs go up when the situation doesn't feel right. He starts looking for the source and can't find it immediately, which is somehow worse than knowing. The file Liddy is building is genuinely dangerous. Photographs of Dexter going to his boat at night with garbage bags, time-stamped, consistent, the kind of evidence that wouldn't prove anything on its own, but would absolutely invite a closer look if it ever got in front of the right person. And then it escalates. Liddy catches Dexter and Lumen on Dexter's boat. They're in the middle of disposing of Jordan Chase's body, Jordan Chase being the final target in the ring of men who hurt Lumen, a self-help guru who built an empire on the philosophy of take what you want, and applied that philosophy in ways that destroyed a number of women's lives. Liddy has zip ties. He has the camcorder recording. He cuffs Dexter to a pole in the boat's cabin and tells him he's calling Quinn. The sequence of what happens next is tight and claustrophobic in a way the show does well. Dexter gets a hand free. Liddy doesn't secure him quite carefully enough, which is the small human error that everything pivots on. There's a struggle. Liddy ends up dead with a knife in his side. Dexter disposes of the recording, and then he and Lumen finish what they started. The extraordinary thing about the Liddy situation is how close it came down to just the zip ties. One correctly secured restraint, and the whole season ends differently. That's the kind of detail the show often buries in the action, but rewards you for thinking about afterward. Jordan Chase himself deserves a mention here too. He captures Dexter at his private camp, the same place where he and his associates conducted their worst crimes, and the confrontation is as much psychological as physical. Jordan has built his whole persona around domination and control. His entire self-help brand, Take It, the seminars, the books, the followers, is built on a philosophy of seizing what you want without apology. And when he has Dexter in front of him, restrained and temporarily helpless, he's in the specific position that his whole life philosophy is oriented around. He believes he holds the advantage. There's something interesting in the parallel between Jordan, Chase, and Dexter that the show doesn't push too hard. Both of them are men who present a constructed version of themselves to the world. Both of them have an underlying reality that contradicts the performance. Dexter performs normality. Jordan performs self-actualization. Both of them are hiding something essential about what they want and what they do. The difference, the show is clear about this, is that Jordan's philosophy actively facilitates harm to others without the code's constraint. And when Dexter eventually has Jordan on the table, there's a sense not just of justice, but of something like contempt. But that's the end of the arc. Before that, there's the camp sequence, which Dexter has to get out of through physical effort and improvisation rather than through any kind of plan. He gets out, he's been in worse situations, but not by much. And then there's the moment that I think is one of the best in the whole season, and possibly one of the best handled near misses in the entire series. Debrew Morgan, who has been investigating the vigilante killers, the two people working their way through Jordan Chase's ring, comes to the kill room. The timing is extremely close. Dexter and Lumen are behind a sheet of hanging plastic. They can hear Deb breathing. She can hear them breathing. She knows someone is back there. She doesn't pull the curtain back. She makes a conscious decision not to look. She says, to the darkness behind the plastic, that she understands why whoever did this did it, and that she hopes they got what they needed. And then she leaves. I want to sit with this for a moment because I don't think it gets the attention it deserves in the general conversation about the show. Deborah Morgan is a homicide detective. She's good at her job. She's standing at a crime scene, technically, with evidence of vigilante justice she is professionally obligated to investigate. And she walks away. She actively chooses to not know. That choice is possible because of everything the season has built toward. Deb has spent 12 episodes understanding the specific context of this particular ring of men, what they did to Lumen and the other women, the years they operated, the ways they were protected, her empathy for the survivor of that experience, and her recognition of what justice actually looks like in a case where the legal system was never going to reach it, gives her the moral permission to do what her gut is already telling her to do. She's going to make a very different choice 2 seasons later in a church, but for tonight she chooses Deborah Morgan is several yards away from her brother standing at the back of the church, ill room sheet. She chooses not to find out. It's a moment the show earns completely because the whole season has been building toward Deb developing an empathy for vigilantism that doesn't sit entirely comfortably with her job, and this is the expression of it. She decides that the specific truth behind that curtain is one she doesn't need. She never knows it's Dexter. That particular truth is going to come later, and from an entirely different direction. But for tonight, she chooses not to look. Season 6 has a somewhat uneven reputation. The Doomsday Killer arc, Travis Marshall and Professor Geller, elaborate tableau based on the Book of Revelation, has its enthusiasts and its critics, and the twist about Geller being a hallucination is one of those things that lands differently depending on how closely you are watching. But what Season 6 does with absolute certainty and no ambiguity whatsoever is set up the single most consequential moment in the show's later history. Everything before and after is, in some sense, organized around one event. Debrew Morgan walking through a church door. But let's talk about the season getting there first. Travis Marshall is staging elaborate crime scenes across Miami, the Four Horsemen, the Whore of Babylon, the opening of the Seven Seals, and Miami Metro is investigating while Dexter is investigating on his own parallel track, as he usually does. The complication with Travis specifically is that he's driven by genuine religious conviction, or at least something that presents as a religious conviction and is entirely impossible to reason with. He's not rational in the way most of Dexter's targets are rational. His decisions are filtered through an apocalyptic framework that makes his behavior genuinely hard to predict. There's also the question of Geller, Professor James Geller, the academic who appears to be Travis's mentor and partner in the killings. Dexter spends much of the season trying to understand the relationship between them, how they divide the work, who is directing whom, and the answer when it comes is that Geller has been dead the whole time. Travis killed him years ago. Geller exists only in Travis's head, a hallucinatory presence that represents Travis's own most extreme impulses, externalized so he doesn't have to own them directly. This is a detail worth pausing on because it changes the nature of the threat Travis represents. He's not a two-person operation. He's not being directed or enabled by an outside intelligence. He's a single man with a very specific delusion operating at a level of commitment that makes him genuinely unpredictable. When Dexter is tracking a rational adversary, the adversary's decisions make a certain kind of sense and can be anticipated. Travis's decisions are filtered through an internal framework that Dexter can't fully access until relatively late in the season. In the middle of the season, Travis manages to capture Dexter. He straps him to a kill table, which is its own kind of poetic reversal, as part of a tableau he's calling Wormwood. The idea, loosely, is that Dexter is to be sacrificed as part of the performance. Travis has put some thought into this. He has the setup, he has the iconography, and he has Dexter restrained and positioned as his props department intended. Dexter gets out of it. The specifics of his escape involve the kind of improvised physical problem solving that he's good at, using what's available to him in the space. But the moment of being on the table, being in the position of the victim rather than the perpetrator, looking up at someone who genuinely intends to kill him as part of something he considers sacred, is one of the more viscerally uncomfortable sequences of the season. Usually when Dexter's in danger, it's from someone who wants to stop him from killing. Travis wants to kill him for entirely separate reasons. As far as Travis is concerned, Dexter just happens to be available. The season builds to its finale, and here the near miss stops being about physical danger and becomes something much larger. Dexter has cornered Travis in a church. Travis is on a table. Dexter kills him, and in that moment there's something almost cathartic about it. A release of the particular tension that's been building across 12 episodes. He doesn't rush. He takes his time. He feels, in the specific way he sometimes feels after a kill, something like peace. I've always thought that the church setting for this particular kill is one of the more deliberate choices the show makes in its later seasons. Dexter has been in parking garages, shipping containers, kill rooms, the Everglades. He's killed in a lot of places. A church is different. It's the one space in Miami that's meant to represent exactly what Dexter doesn't have access to. Grace, forgiveness, the possibility of being known and loved anyway. And Dexter does what Dexter does there, in that space, surrounded by all that iconography, which is either the show being very heavy-handed or being very precise. I lean toward precise. And then the church doors open. Deborah. She has been looking for Dexter. She has her own reason for being there that has nothing to do with the Doomsday case. She's been working through some complicated feelings about her brother, been talking to a therapist, arrived at a specific emotional realization she wanted to share with him. She came to find him. She finds him with a knife, standing over a dead man, in a room staged with all the identifying marks of Dexter's ritual. The season ends on her face. She sees everything. She knows everything. She can't unknow it. What's worth sitting with here is that it's not an investigation that breaks Dexter open. It's not Lundy's task force or LaGuerta's suspicions or forensic evidence pointing the wrong direction. It's just his sister arriving at an inconvenient moment. The most devastating exposure in the show's first 6 seasons happens because Dexter chose a church in Miami, and Debrew Morgan drove to the same postcode. And it's worth considering what that means for everything that comes before it. All those seasons of close calls, Dokes with his GPS tracker, Lundy with his task force, LaGuerta with her quiet refusal to accept the official story, none of them had the thing Deb has, which is a direct, complete, inarguable witnessing. LaGuerta suspected, Dokes intuited, Lundy profiled, but Deborah saw, and there's a difference between having evidence that points toward a conclusion and having the conclusion laid out directly in front of you in a church with a knife in someone's chest. The person who finally sees him, truly sees him, is the person who has been closest to him his entire life. And the reason that's so specifically devastating is that Deb has spent 6 seasons being the show's heart, the emotional through line, the person whose reactions to events tell us how we should feel about them, the character whose fundamental decency anchors the whole enterprise. If the show had been found out by Lundy, it would have been a thriller ending. being found out by Deborah is something else. It's a reckoning. Everything from season 7 onward exists in the shadow of that church door opening. If you had to identify the single season of Dexter that runs the most sustained, multi-directional pressure on its central character, season 7 is probably it. Not because any one threat is uniquely terrifying, though some of them are, but because of the volume. Dexter is simultaneously navigating a Ukrainian mob boss who has come to Miami specifically to kill him, a cemetery caretaker who nearly beats him to death with a table leg, and a senior police officer who is 2 deductions away from making an arrest that would stick, 3 separate only loosely connected to each other. All of them running at the same time. And underneath all of it, holding everything together and making it worse, is the fact that Deborah now knows, which changes the texture of every single scene in a way that the show handles unusually well. The knowledge between them is always present, even when it isn't being discussed, and it inflects every interaction with a quality of fragility that didn't LaGuerta's suspicions about Dexter have been building since season 7 and come to a head in season 7.e a conclusion. Let's start with Deborah because it colors everything else. The immediate aftermath of the church is Deb trying to make sense of what she's seen and what it means. She pulls Dexter over in the car. She takes him home. She can't turn him in. She's already decided that much in the first 5 minutes, though she hasn't fully worked out why, so instead she puts him in her apartment and tells him he's going to sleep in her bed while she sleeps on the couch near the door. He needs to be honest with her. That's the rule. And so Dexter is for the first time in his life actually honest with someone. The conversations in that apartment early in season 7 are some of the most interesting in the show's run because Dexter isn't performing. He's just answering questions as directly as he can because there's finally a person in front of him who already knows the worst of it and is still there. Deb's response to all of this is complicated and changes over the course of the season. She goes from horror to a kind of exhausted acceptance to a genuine complicity that nobody, including her, would have predicted at the start of the season. There's a scene that I think is one of the most quietly devastating in the whole show, where Deborah is sitting with a therapist and working through her feelings, and she mentions that she has romantic feelings for Dexter, which is uncomfortable for obvious reasons and also for the specific reason that it means the person she's been going to for emotional support is the person whose secret she's keeping. And those two things are tangled together in a way that makes everything worse. The show uses that revelation carefully. It's not dwelt on. It doesn't become the center of the season, but it explains something about why Deb makes the choices she makes. The investment she has in Dexter is not purely sisterly. It is also something else, something harder to name and harder to manage. And it makes the choices she makes on his behalf, not just covering for him, but actively helping him, actively deceiving LaGuerta, eventually shooting LaGuerta, makes sense in a way that's genuinely uncomfortable. The relevant point for our purposes is this. Having Deb know is both a relief and a profound liability. She's now implicated. If Dexter gets caught, she's destroyed. And she's not as controlled as Dexter is. She has feelings about it in a way that he doesn't, fully, and feelings are unpredictable. Now, Izak Sirko is the head of the Koshka Brotherhood, a Ukrainian criminal organization with significant operations in Miami, centered around a strip club called the Foxhole. Dexter killed Viktor Baskov, a Brotherhood enforcer, in season 7's early episodes, because Viktor's fingerprint turned up at a crime scene involving a murdered cop. Dexter dealt with it the way he deals with things, and then Izak Sirko arrived to find out what happened to Viktor. Here's the thing about Izak Sirko that the season takes its time establishing. He is not simply a crime boss who has sent an enforcer to Miami as a standard business measure. Viktor and Isaac were in love. Isaac is grieving. The trip to Miami is not a professional obligation, it's a personal one. He has come to find out what happened to the person he loved, and to make sure that whatever happened to Viktor happens to the person responsible. This is why Isaac is so dangerous. He's not motivated by profit or organizational obligation or territory. He's motivated by grief, which is a kind of motivation that doesn't respond to the usual logic of threat management. You can't buy grief off. You can't redirect it. You can't convince it that the mathematics d'Isaac Circo has come to Miami to investigate Victor's disappearance, and he will stay until the job is done or he can't continue. Can't continue. The apartment scene is the one I always come back to when I think about Season 7's Close Calls. Dexter comes home to his apartment and notices something is off. His curtains are open. Harrison and Jamie are in Orlando. Nobody should have been in his apartment. He calls his own home phone from a mobile, putting on a voice, pretending to be a friend, confirming a meeting at a restaurant called Schooner or later. He says it loudly and clearly, giving a location. Isaac, who is lying in wait inside the apartment, who has been there for who knows how long, planning to capture and hurt Dexter in a very specific way, overhears the message and leaves to intercept the meeting. Dexter watches from a distance as Isaac walks out of his building. The image of Dexter standing on the street watching a man leave his own apartment who is there to kill him is one of those quiet images the show sometimes produces that is somehow scarier than anything loud. It's so close. And it was avoided by a phone call in a date. They eventually end up face to face in a bar, Dexter tracking Isaac from a distance, then Isaac spotting him, and the two of them sitting at the bar having a conversation that is entirely polite and entirely terrifying. Terrifying. Isaac tells Dexter what he did to the last person who gave him information about Victor. He says he's not just going to kill Dexter, he plans to kill everyone involved in Victor's death, including Deborah. Dexter insists Deb had nothing to do with it. Isaac says he'll take that under advisement. The conversation ends with Isaac spotting where Dexter is watching from, looking directly at him across the room and saying, almost warmly, "Hello, handsome." It's a great line. Ray Stevenson delivers it perfectly, and it's terrifying precisely because there's no anger in it. There's no performative menace. Isaac is just settled. He knows what he's doing. He knows how this ends. He's in no hurry. Dexter has Deborah go into hiding. He changes his own routines. He starts trying to find an angle on Isaac, something he can use, some way to neutralize the threat without triggering the Brotherhood's broader retaliation apparatus. The difficulty is that killing Isaac quietly isn't simple when Isaac is being actively watched by both the Brotherhood and, increasingly, by Miami Metro, who have their own reasons to be interested in the head of the Koshka organization. There's a sequence where Dexter tries to set up the Brotherhood's rivals, a Colombian cartel, to take out Isaac for him. He breaks into Victor's apartment to arrange the scene. He runs into a hitman who has already been sent there, sent by George Novikov within the Brotherhood rather than by any external enemy. Dexter dispatches the hitman quickly, but the discovery tells him something important. Isaac has been cut off by his own organization. The Brotherhood has decided he's become a liability, which means Isaac no longer has institutional backup, which does not make him less dangerous. A man with nothing to lose who has come specifically for you and is no longer constrained by organizational interests is arguably more dangerous than one who is. But it does change the equation somewhat. The Isaac situation eventually resolves itself through those same Brotherhood politics. The resolution is strange and includes a sort of reluctant mutual respect between Dexter and Isaac that the show handles well. But the sustained threat of Isaac Circo, the knowledge that there's a man in Miami with professional skills and professional resources who is specifically looking for Dexter, is a specific kind of pressure that never fully lifts while it's active. But then there's the Speltzer sequence, which is a different category of close. The character's name is Ray Speltzer, entirely. E.J. Speltzer is a cemetery caretaker with a very specific methodology. He creates elaborate spaces, mazes, warehouses, buildings full of mannequins, and then chases his victims through them wearing a bullhorn helmet and carrying an axe. He kills for the sport of the pursuit itself. He's physically enormous, he's strong, and he's been doing this long enough that he's genuinely good at it. Dexter breaks into Speltzer's RV while Speltzer is away looking for evidence. He finds trophies, earrings, steroids, and is noting what he sees when Speltzer comes back. Unexpectedly, earlier Speltzer becomes completely enraged, and the confrontation is overwhelmingly physical. With almost no real negotiation, just Speltzer picking Dexter up and throwing him into walls with the kind of force that communicates how outmatched Dexter is in a straight fight with someone this size. He won this size. Dexter manages to throw Speltzer down twice, which slows things. Then Speltzer knocks him out with a broken table leg. Dexter wakes up in an abandoned warehouse. Lying on the floor, a note nearby says one word: run. He decides not to run. He looks around, assessing. Then Speltzer comes through a door in the bullhorn helmet with the axe, moving quickly and purposefully. He runs. The chase through the warehouse is legitimately harrowing in a way that some of Dexter's physical confrontations aren't, because the power differentia Dexter is fast and resourceful, but he cannot reliably physically overpower Speltzer. That option doesn't really exist. Doesn't exist. He's navigating a building full of mannequins in the dark, using angles and doorways and staircases, staying ahead by whatever margin he can manage. He gets to a roof. Speltzer is right behind him. Dexter drops to a lower rooftop, then to the street, and escapes on the back of a passing truck. He runs. The chase through the warehouse is legitimately harrowing in a way that some of Dexter's physical confrontations aren't, because the power differential is so clear. Dexter is fast and resourceful, but he cannot physically overpower Speltzer. That option doesn't exist. He's navigating a building full of mannequins in the dark, using angles and doorways and staircases, staying ahead by whatever margin he can manage. He gets to a roof. Speltzer is right behind him. Dexter drops to a lower rooftop, then to the street, and escapes on the back of a passing truck. I want to be specific about this. Dexter gets away from Speltzer by running, by outrunning him. He doesn't outfight him, doesn't outthink him in that moment, doesn't deploy some clever reversal. He just runs faster. And that particular flavor of near miss, the one where the escape isn't elegant, where it's just barely enough, is rarer in the series than you might expect. The Speltzer situation also reveals something about where Dexter is emotionally in Season 7 that matters for everything. Dexter is grieving the victims Speltzer takes while Dexter was regrouping, but Deb is not there to see it. Was regrouping. She confronts him about it, tells him that because he didn't act when he could have, someone died. Dexter acknowledges it in his way, and there's a version of this conversation that Deb is going to have in her head for the rest of the series. The question of what the code costs, whether the code actually protects anyone, whether keeping Dexter's secret is in any net sense a good thing to do. She hasn't reached a conclusion yet, but the question is forming. Dexter gets his revenge on Speltzer eventually. He catches him, puts him on a table, takes a blood slide, standard. But the night he ran across the rooftop in the dark, with an axe behind him and no plan, that night doesn't quite go away. And Deborah, who knows now, watched him pack his kit the next day with an expression that's hard to read. And now Lakwertu. Muriel Lakwertu finds a blood slide at the church where Travis Marshall was killed. This is the slide from that night, Dexter's trophy, the way he marks each kill, sitting in a church that's been treated as a crime scene. Lakwertu knows what blood slides mean. She has known for years, in the background of everything, that there was something wrong about the Bay Harbor butcher conclusion. She's never accepted that Dokes was the butcher. She's kept it quiet mostly, but she's kept it. She opens an unofficial investigation. She does this quietly without telling anyone at the department because she knows she's going to be seen as obsessed and grieving and unable to accept the official finding. She starts pulling threads. The marina record, Dexter moved his boat from Coral Cove Marina 8 months before his lease was up. The connection to the Estrada case, which has its own fingerprints of Dexter's involvement if you know what to look for. What I always appreciate about Laguertu's investigation, and I think she deserves more credit for it than the show's fans usually give her, is the total absence of luck in it. She's not stumbling onto things, she's not finding things by accident. Every conclusion she reaches through logical inference. The blood slide leads her to think the real butcher was at the Travis Marshall crime scene. The real butcher at the Travis Marshall scene means the butcher is still active. An active butcher means Dokes wasn't the butcher. She holds that deduction against what she knows about the butcher's methodology, the vigilante quality, the specific victim selection, the forensic precision, and she starts building toward a person rather than a profile. Her problem is that she has no institutional support. Matthews tells her to drop it. Angel Batistu doesn't believe her. Quinn is dealing with his own complications, and Deborah, who knows everything, is working very hard to steer Laguertu's investigation in non-damaging directions while appearing to help with it. The entire department thinks Laguertu is a grieving friend, unable to accept the official conclusion. And they're wrong. She is in fact the only person at Miami Metro conducting a sound investigation. Thomas Matthews, the deputy chief, is the one who tells Dexter he's in the frame. He sits with Dexter on his boat, hangs Christmas lights, and essentially delivers an interrogation disguised as a friendly warning. He lays out Laguertu's logic. Dexter's childhood, the container, what happened to his mother, his brother Brian, and what Brian went on to become, the cabin in the Everglades where Dokes died. The man named Jimenez Matthews doesn't say, "It's weird, right? It's weird, right?" All of these connections. Just weird. Dexter holds it together. He feeds Matthews a story that he saw Dokes at the marina and suspected something but was afraid to come forward. Matthews appears to buy it. He says he'll get Laguertu to back off. Laguertu doesn't back off. She brings Dexter into a formal interrogation. This is the scene where she lays out everything she has calmly and precisely and accuses him directly of being the Bay Harbor butcher. She has the photos from the marina camera, Dexter carrying garbage bags onto his boat. She has the shirt of Hector Estrada, whose blood is on it, that Dexter has been using to frame Estrada as part of a longer strategy. She tells Dexter to admit it. Musuku and Deb arrive. Musuku has run tests on the shirt and found an evidence number showing it came from the 1973 inventory. Laguertu's partial print is on the wallet. The evidence, as presented, looks like Laguertu is framing Dexter rather than the other way around. Dexter is released. Both Laguertu and Deb know that Dexter planted that evidence. Laguertu confronts him in the elevator. She says that Dokes always knew there was something wrong with him. Dexter says nothing. The thing about Laguertu is that she's right about everything. Every instinct, every deduction, every piece of evidence she pursues, all of it is correct. The show never gives her a wrong turn. She is pursuing the truth with perfect accuracy, and the only reason she doesn't succeed is that the people around her are either dismissing her or actively working to stop her, including eventually Deborah. The season finale puts all of it in a single scene. Laguertu corners Dexter at a shipping container yard. The specific location is meaningful. It mirrors where Dexter's origin story began, which I don't think is accidental, with a gun on him. Deborah arrives. Laguertu turns to her. She asks Deb to think about what's happening here, what the right thing is, what she's actually protecting. She's not saying it to manipulate Deb. She genuinely believes that Deb, given a moment to think clearly outside of her brother's influence, will make the right choice. She trusts Deb's fundamental decency. Dexter tells Deborah it's okay. He says, let her shoot him. This is the most extraordinary moment of season 7 and possibly of the whole series, and it doesn't get discussed enough. Dexter, who has spent 8 years fighting to survive, engineering his own survival in increasingly elaborate ways, tells the person who loves him most to let someone else kill him. He means it, or he means it as much as Dexter means anything. The logic is, if Laguertu shoots him, Deb's career is intact, Deb's life is intact, Harrison has someone. The code, at its best, was always about protecting the people around Dexter from the consequences of what he is. This is a version of that, taken to its extreme. Deborah shoots LaGuardia instead. It's the most decisive and devastating single moment of the show's 8-season run in terms of what it does to a character. Deb chooses Dexter over her career, over her ethics, over her own sense of self. She kills a colleague and friend to protect her brother. And she will spend the rest of the series carrying that weight, which is, as we'll get to, not a weight she survives. Season 8 is the last season, and it knows it. The energy is different, quieter, more reflective, more interested in closure than escalation. Dexter is thinking, for perhaps the first time with any real seriousness, about what a life after all of this might look like. He has Hannah Mouquet, a fellow killer who is also genuinely the most stable romantic relationship he's had since Rita. He has Harrison, he has Argentina as a plan, a physical destination, a place to point himself. The season is about whether he actually gets there. The answer, as you know if you've watched it, is complicated. Dr. Evelyn Vogel arrives in Miami and brings with her something that is, in its own way, as unsettling as any physical threat. Vogel is a neuropsychiatrist. She's also the person who helped Harry design the code. She has files on Dexter going back decades, documentation of his psychology, his development, his early kills, her own assessments of his condition. She knows exactly what he is because she helped construct the framework within which he operates. Dexter's first response to Vogel is the same response any rational person would have to. Discovering that a stranger holds comprehensive documented evidence of their secret double life. Controlled alarm. She has leverage he can't immediately neutralize. She could expose him, or she could use what she knows to manage him. And for a few episodes, neither option is entirely off the table. Vogel turns out to be an ally rather than a threat, but the transition isn't immediate, and the danger of her existence, the simple fact that she knows and has documentation and is not entirely predictable, is a specific kind of suspense that the season uses well. The main antagonist of Season 8 is Oliver Saxon, and Saxon is connected to Vogel in the worst possible way. He is her son. His real name is Daniel Vogel. He was placed in a mental health facility as a teenager. Vogel and her husband determined he was a psychopath after he drowned his younger brother and showed no remorse, and they covered that death up as an accident. And at 17, he and 6 other patients were killed in a fire at the facility. Except they weren't. He faked his death. He's been operating under the name Oliver Saxon, and he's been staging elaborate kills, brain tissue removed from victims, pieces left for Evelyn as a way of communicating with his mother. The whole brain surgeon arc is, in its fundamental architecture, a son trying to get his mother's attention through the only language he knows. It's not a great situation for anyone involved. Dexter tracks him through forensic genealogy. He matches a hair sample found at one of the brain surgeon scenes to Vogel. He ages a childhood photo of Daniel and realizes with a 97.6% facial match that Oliver Saxon, the man his neighbor Cassie has been dating, and Daniel Vogel are the same person, same person. The investigation of Saxon and the protection of Vogel then become Dexter's parallel priorities, and they conflict with each other in ways that make Season 8's back half increasingly urgent. Saxon coming for Dexter is where the physical close calls of Season 8 concentrate. The apartment scene happens at night. Dexter's in bed. Saxon has broken in. He's made it into Dexter's bedroom, which is an intimate and specific kind of violation. He has a knife. He is there to kill Dexter in his own home, in his own bed, while he sleeps, except Dexter is not asleep. He is lying entirely still, monitoring the room, waiting. Deborah is positioned near the door with a gun. The moment Saxon reaches the bedside, Dexter moves. There's a syringe, the M99, that has been Dexter's chemical signature throughout the whole series. And Saxon goes down. The reversal is satisfying, but only because Dexter anticipated it. If he'd genuinely been asleep, if Deb hadn't been there, if Saxon had moved faster, any of those changes, and this is the night it ends. Saxon was in the apartment, he was feet away. The margin was Dexter's foresight and nothing else. Dexter has Saxon strapped to his own kill table eventually. This is when things get interesting in an unexpected direction. He decides he doesn't want to kill Saxon himself. He wants Saxon to face the legal system, partly to spare himself the immediate complications, partly because he's trying to leave for Argentina, and a kill here makes that harder. He calls Deb to arrest Saxon instead. A U.S. Marshal named Clayton has been following Deborah. He's tracking Hannah McKay, who's a fugitive, and Deborah is connected to Dexter, who is connected to Hannah. Clayton finds the makeshift hospital room where Saxon is strapped down. Saxon tells Clayton he's the victim. Clayton, who has no reason to believe otherwise and no knowledge of what's actually happening, uncuffs him. Saxon kills Clayton immediately with one of Dexter's knives. Then, when Deborah enters the room, he shoots her in the stomach. This is where the Season 8 near-miss calculus gets complicated. Saxon shoots Deborah. Deborah, who survives the surgery and initially seems to be recovering, which gives the final episodes a brief, fragile window of hope. Dexter and Deborah have a hospital conversation that is, in its way, one of the most honest they've ever had. She tells him he deserves to be happy. She tells him to go to Argentina. She says she'll see him soon. Then comes what leads to Dexter being genuinely, permanently why with Saxon now arrested and in custody. Dexter enters the holding cell under the pretense of performing a GSR test. A GSR test. He knows where the security camera is. He positions himself correctly. And then he tells Saxon, calmly and directly, exactly what he's there to do. He's going to kill him with the pen on the table between them. It is deliberately a bait. Dexter's inviting Saxon to move first. Saxon moves first. He grabs the pen and stabs Dexter in the shoulder. Dexter, in apparent self-defense, takes the pen back and stabs Saxon in the neck. As Saxon bleeds out on the floor, Dexter hits the alarm. 2 officers rush in. Dexter's against the wall, looking terrified. It's a performance, and it works. Quinn and Baptiste review the footage and call it clean self-defense. The shoulder wound is real. Dexter planned to take the stab. He needed Saxon to throw the first punch on camera, so he manufactured a situation where Saxon would do exactly that. It's cold-blooded in the specific way that Dexter is cold-blooded, not in a violent way, but in a calculating way. A willingness to absorb physical harm in service of a clean outcome. He literally let someone stab him in the shoulder to produce the right evidence. No notes. But then Saxon finds a way to do damage even from custody. He escapes briefly through the chaos of the hurricane evacuation and gets to Deborah in the hospital. She survives the shooting. She doesn't survive what happens in the ICU. The blood clot, the stroke, the oxygen deprivation. Dexter sits with her. She's intubated. She's not there in any meaningful sense. What's in that hospital bed is what's left after the oxygen was cut off, and it isn't Deb. He makes the decision that the show has been building toward. Since the moment she walked through that church door in season 6, he turns off the machine. He leans close to her and says, very quietly, "I love you, Deb." The show has been building to this moment in ways that aren't always obvious in the watching of it, but become clear in retrospect. Debrew Morgan has been, from the very first episode, the human anchor of the show. The person whose love for Dexter is unconditional enough to survive knowing what he is, and whose presence in his life is the argument against the idea that someone like Dexter can't genuinely connect with anyone. When she dies, not as a consequence of some dramatic confrontation, but as the downstream result of a chain of choices Dexter made over 8 years, the show is making a specific and honest statement. The cost isn't abstract. It was her. He carries her out of the hospital. He drives his boat out to sea. He drops her into the ocean. He calls Hannah and Harrison one last time and tells them he loves them. and to go live their lives. He throws his phone into the water. And then he drives the slice of life directly into Hurricane Laura. The wreckage is found the next morning. No survivors apparent. Batistu is notified. The official assumption is that Dexter Morgan died in the storm. There is something I want to sit with here because I think it often gets glossed over in discussions of the finale. Dexter drives his boat into the hurricane because he has decided, in the wake of Deb's death, that he is the thing that destroys the people he loves. Not accidentally, not occasionally, but as a fundamental property of what he is. Everyone he gets close to either dies or gets broken. Rita, Deb, Harry in his own way. The logic he arrives at is that the only way to protect Hannah and Harrison, the two people he has left, is to remove himself from their proximity. He doesn't fake his death as an escape. He fakes it as a sacrifice. Whether you find that convincing depends on how charitably you read Dexter's capacity for genuine self-awareness versus self-serving rationalization. I genuinely go back and forth on it. But the choice is real, and the grief that prompts it is real, and the image of him disconnecting Deb from life support and then driving into a hurricane is the show's most concentrated statement about what Dexter's life has cost. The very last scene of the original series is a logging truck in the Pacific Northwest. The driver pulls up, steps out, walks to a rented room, closes the door. He turns to face the camera, and behind the beard and the flannel and the years is Dexter Morgan, alive, in exile, eyes open. He chose to disappear rather than actually die, which is, in its own way, entirely consistent. Before we get to Iorn Lake and New Blood, there's a period worth acknowledging, the decade between the end of the original series and the events of the revival. Dexter Morgan in a Pacific Northwest logging camp, not killing anyone. 10 years of doing exactly what Harry spent a lifetime telling him he couldn't do, containing it. The show doesn't dwell on this in detail, and I think that's probably the right call because the specifics would be more interesting as a story told than as a premise explained. But New Blood shows us the edges of it. Jim Lindsay is careful. He has routines and habits built around the specific purpose of managing the urge rather than following it. He has a job that involves physical work and isolation. He has a relationship with Angela that is genuine, but that he keeps at a precise emotional distance, close enough to feel like a normal life, not so close that he tracks a local serial killer called the Runaway Killer, an Iorn Lake resident whose pattern he recognizes, and ultimately kills him. The show emphasizes that Dexter didn't know about the Runaway Killer during those 10 years. The Runaway Killer met Dexter's owed its criteria, and he chose not to act. Whether that's growth or just a different form of denial is something the show doesn't fully settle, and I appreciate that. What it means for the near-miss analysis is this: the decade of silence doesn't undo the patterns that were established over 8 seasons. It just pauses them. And when Matt Caldwell shoots the white deer and the patterns restart, they restart with all their original momentum, as if they were never paused at all. When Dexter New Blood started airing in 2021, the premise was almost deliberately tranquil. Jim Lindsay, as he now calls himself, lives in Iron Lake, New York, a small town in the Adirondacks. He works at a hunting and outdoor supply shop. He has a girlfriend and Julie Bishop, the town's chief of police, which is either fate or terrible luck, depending on how you look at it. He has friends at the local bar. He feeds a white deer that visits his property and has assigned it some personal significance. He has not killed anyone in 10 years. Then Matt Caldwell shoots the white deer for sport, and Dexter kills Matt Caldwell. This is the event that starts the clock. Everything that follows in New Blood is the consequence of that single decision, and it accumulates faster than Dexter expects. It's worth pausing on the white deer for a moment because the show uses it very deliberately. The white deer appears on Seneca land near Dexter's cabin, and he's been watching it for a while. It has a kind of personal significance that the show never fully explains in words but doesn't need to. It's an animal that's pure, rare, and on protected land. When Matt Caldwell shoots it for fun, for the social media moment, for the trophy, he's being precisely the kind of person the old Dexter would have targeted without a second thought. The deer is a trigger and a symbol, and a very practical problem all at once. Dexter has been not killing for 10 years, but this is the kind of thing he was built to respond to. He responds. Matt is the son of Kurt Caldwell, the most powerful and connected man in Iron Lake, a trucking magnate, a local institution, a man who everyone in town knows and most of them like and none of them fully understand. Kurt reports his son missing. Angela opens a missing person case, and a thermal camera that Kurt had set up on his property near the woods where the shooting happened gives investigators footage of Jim and another figure on the night Matt disappeared. Dexter doesn't know about the camera. That's the detail that changes everything, because the whole framework of Dexter's life, the whole reason he's been invisible for 10 years, is built on knowing where the eyes are. In Miami, he could navigate the surveillance because he understood the system. In Iron Lake, in a small town in the mountains, there's a camera he didn't account for. It gives Angela a reason to look more closely. The situation with Kurt Caldwell is its own category of threat, separate from the investigation. Kurt puts things together faster than Dexter expects. He figures out that Jim killed his son. And rather than going to Angela, which would expose his own secret, since Kurt has been running his own murder operation for 25 years in the woods near Iron Lake, he decides to handle it directly. Kurt Caldwell is one of the more interesting antagonists in the Dexter universe because he inverts the normal dynamic in a genuinely He's the unofficial authority in Iron Lake, connected, respected, the person everyone goes to, or Iwan goes to. He's also been killing young women for 25 years, luring them to the area and hunting them in a bunker beneath his cabin. The women he kills are runaways and drifters, people who fall through the gaps, people whose disappearances don't generate much official attention. He's been doing this in plain sight as a pillar of his community for longer than Dexter has been killing anyone. There's something in the parallel that the show is intentional about. Two men, both killers, both maintaining normal-seeming lives in the communities around them, both trying to keep their real activities invisible. But where Dexter targets people the code identifies as unambiguous predators, Kurt targets the vulnerable. It's the clearest articulation in the whole franchise of why the code matters, not as a philosophical position, but as the specific, practical thing that separates Dexter from the predators he hunts. Kurt tries to frame Dexter for Matt's murder initially. He strips his cabin, removes everything that could connect him to what happened. He leaves a note for Angela suggesting that Matt is alive and well, and in New York, which buys time, but also raises questions when Matt's phone goes dark and no one can reach him. He orchestrates things carefully, and then when the framing starts to unravel, he burns down Dan. Then Elric Kane takes a position in the trees near the road and puts a rifle scope on Dexter's chest. Dexter's chest. The shot misses. Dexter moves at the right moment, or the angle is wrong or something. He survives it. He takes the threat very seriously after that, which means Kurt Caldwell gets dealt with before he can take a second shot. But there's something about that rifle scope in the trees that I keep coming back to. It's the least theatrical near miss in the show's entire run. No monologuing, no elaborate plan, no ritual. Just a man who wants another man dead and a rifle and a missed shot in the dark. Dexter kills Kurt. Dexter had been building evidence against Kurt throughout the back half of the season, pointing Angela toward Kurt's underground trophy room, the bunker beneath his cabin where he kept the bodies of young women he'd been hunting. And eventually that evidence comes out. Angela finds the bunker, she finds the bodies, she finds Molly Park, the true crime podcaster who had been investigating the missing women cases and who Kurt killed when she got too close. But the bunker is not what gets Dexter arrested. What gets Dexter arrested is a bone screw. Angela finds a bone screw in the burned remains of Dexter's cabin. She compares it to the screws found in Matt Caldwell's dismembered remains when the body eventually surfaces. The match is enough for Angela to arrest Kurt. "Oh, bring him in." And then she goes further. She's been thinking about a case that crossed her desk. A man named Jasper Hodge found dead in Iron Lake. Injection mark on his neck. Ketamine in his system. A drug she didn't associate with anything local until she started thinking about Jim Lindsay. She pulls the records. She looks at the Bay Harbor Butcher case files. All those Miami murders, all those dismembered bodies found in garbage bags. Injection marks. Same drug. She's been thinking about a case that crossed her desk. A man named Jasper Hodge found dead in Iron Lake. Injection mark on his neck. Ketamine in his system. A drug she didn't associate with anything local until she started thinking about Jim Lindsay. She pulls the records. She looks at the Bay Harbor Butcher case files, all those Miami murders, all those dismembered bodies found in garbage bags, injection marks, same drug. She calls Angel Batistu. Batistu's response to being told that Dexter Morgan is alive, living in New York State under an alias, and apparently still killing, is understandably not calm. He tells Angela something she needs to hear. Murillo Laguertu was killed right after she figured out the same thing Angela is figuring out. He's getting on a plane. What I find genuinely compelling about Angela's investigation and what distinguishes it from Laguertu's is that it has no personal dimension. Laguertu was investigating because she cared about Dokes and couldn't accept the official version. Angela is investigating because she's a good cop and the evidence is there. She doesn't want it to be Jim Lindsay. She cares about Jim. She cares about Harrison. None of that changes what the bone screws and the ketamine and the thermal footage add up to. She's also not alone in the way Laguertu was. She has Batistu coming. She has a community that knows her and trusts her. She's operating from a position of institutional support rather than isolated obsession. That's why the outcome is different. The interrogation that follows is one of the cleanest pieces of investigative work the show has produced. Angela lays everything out, the thermal camera footage, the bone screws matched to Matt's body, the ketamine in Jasper Hodges' system matching the ketamine in Bay Harbor Butcher victims, the Marina records from Miami, Angel Batistu's confirmation that Dexter Morgan isn't dead. She doesn't have a complete case. She has enough of a case that she doesn't need to bluff. What she asks for, essentially, is for Dexter to fill in the gaps. He doesn't. He gives her Kurt instead, the bunker, the women, the 25 years of murder that the town of Iron Lake has been living on top of without knowing. It's a trade offered rather than promised, and Angela takes the information without agreeing to anything. There's a quality to this interrogation that's different from anything Dexter has faced before. Laguertu came to him with suspicion and an incomplete picture, and he could work around the edges of it. Lundy was investigating a profile rather than a person. The Matthews conversation was a semi-friendly warning from someone with his own reasons not to push too hard. Angela is none of those things. She has evidence. She has Batista incoming with Dex. She has the death penalty as a possible outcome if Florida gets him back. And she has no personal motive to let it go. Her care for Jim Lindsay is real, but it doesn't outweigh what she's looking at. Dexter's only leverage in that room is Kurt's bunker, and it works, barely, to buy him enough time to try to escape. But this is the first interrogation in the whole franchise where Dexter's control of the situation is genuinely minimal. Angela has done the work. There's no performance convincing enough to undo the bone screws. Harrison is allowed to see Dexter for 5 minutes. They hug. Dexter tells his son he's been in tougher spots. Harrison doesn't say the thing he's thinking, which is that he watched his father stalk a deer in those woods with a very specific kind of focused attention. And he's been carrying that image around for weeks. The escape, when it comes, is not elegant. Logan brings Dexter a glass of water. Dexter waits for the moment when Logan's guard comes down fractionally, reaches through the bars of the cell, and slams Logan's face into the metal. He spins him, gets the chokehold on. He tells Logan he doesn't want to hurt him, that all he needs are the keys. Logan touches the keys on his belt and then decides to unsnap his holster instead. He fires backward through the bars. Misses. Dexter breaks his neck. Logan is dead. Dexter takes the police car. He calls Harrison from Logan's phone, tells him to grab his things, meet him at the spot where the white deer was killed. Angela comes back to the station and finds Logan on the floor. Harrison is at the rendezvous point when Dexter arrives. Harrison asks whose blood is on him. Dexter says he'll explain everything. Harrison realizes the phone call came from Logan's number. He understands immediately what that means. The conversation that follows is the one the show has been building towards since Harrison arrived in Iron Lake. Harrison has been listening to Molly Park's true crime podcast, has heard the Tri-Nighty Killer episode, has seen his mother's name in the case file, has understood at some level what his father did and didn't do and what it cost. He's been carrying all of that silently through the wrestling season, through finding something that felt like belonging in Iron Lake, through falling in love with Audrey Bishop. He has been watching his father with a very specific kind of attention that Dexter, preoccupied with survival, didn't fully notice. Harrison has his own dark passenger. The show is honest about this. There are self-harm scars, a straight razor hidden in a flashlight, a set of behaviors Dexter recognizes. Harrison has been making a choice, episode by episode, not to follow that path. What he does at the end of the season is, in its own terrible way, the same refusal carried to its conclusion. He asks if his mother would be alive if it weren't for Dexter, if Deb would be alive. Faces appear in quick succession: Logan, LaGuertu, Dokes, Lundy, Harry, Rita, Deborah, everyone who died in Dexter's orbit. Dexter doesn't argue. He doesn't construct a defense. He agrees that Harrison deserves a better life and a better father. He tells Harrison to take the safety off the rifle. And here is the final near miss, or the final not a near miss, depending on how you see it. Harrison shoots his father. Dexter falls. In his last breath, he tells Harrison that he did good. Angela arrives. She finds Harrison standing over Dexter's body, rifle in his hands. She considers what has happened, what it would do to Harrison to arrest him, what kind of justice this actually represents. She makes a decision. She takes the rifle from him. She embraces him. She gives him cash and tells him to leave Iron Lake and never come back. She wipes down the rifle and calls in an officer-related shooting on herself. Harrison drives out of town. He passes Logan's body being carried out of the station. He drives past Audrey's house and sees her in the window, and he keeps driving. Police cars pass him going the other direction, heading toward Iron Lake. Dexter Morgan, who survived being shot by Dokes, being locked up by his own brother, being caught red-handed in the Everglades, being shot at and chased with an axe and cornered in interrogation rooms and hunted by a Ukrainian mob boss and stabbed in the shoulder with his own pen, was finally killed by his own son on a dark road in the Adirondacks with one bullet. There's something in that. I don't know exactly what, but there's something. And that, I think, is where we leave it for tonight. Sitting with the whole of it, all 8 seasons, the revival, nearly 2 decades of close calls. What strikes me most is just how much of Dexter's survival wasn't about skill. Some of it was skill. He is genuinely competent, genuinely smart, genuinely good at what he does. But an enormous amount of it was luck and timing and other people making decisions that went in his favor when they didn't have to. Lila opening the propane valve. Deb not pulling back the curtain in the kill room. Deborah shooting LaGuertu when she could have made a different choice. Logan reaching for his gun instead of the keys. The county jail being overcrowded the night Dexter had Arthur Mitchell's unconscious body in a van. A GPS tracker leading Isaac Zierko to a restaurant call rather than Dexter's apartment. A thermal camera in the woods that he didn't know about. a bone screw that survived a fire. It adds up. Over 20 plus years in universe, over all of these individual moments, there's a math to Dexter's survival, and a significant portion of it is just the universe going his way again and again, right up until the very last moment when it didn't. I've always thought the show understood that, even when it didn't say it out loud. The voiceover often presents Dexter as uniquely capable, uniquely controlled, uniquely able to navigate his situation. And that's true in a lot of ways, but the show also consistently put him in situations where the outcome was genuinely not in his hands, where another person's decision or another person's mistake or another person's love was the thing standing between Dexter Morgan and a very bad ending. The ending he did get in New Blood is its own kind of completion, not a hero's death, not a villain's arrest, a father being held accountable by the only person whose judgment he couldn't run a performance for, his own son, who loved him enough to see him clearly and honest enough to know what that meant. There's something about the whole arc that keeps returning to me. Dokes was the first person who truly saw Dexter, who looked at him and knew without being able to prove it what was there. And then Brian saw him. And then Miguel thought he saw him, but only saw what he wanted to see. And Laguertu saw him, and Deborah saw him, and Angela saw him, and Harrison saw him. Each person who truly saw Dexter paid for it in some way, some of them with their lives, some with something else that might have been harder to lose. The only person who saw him clearly and survived and chose not to stay, chose to drive away with tears running down her face and a bag of money on the seat next to her, was Hannah. And maybe that's something. Maybe the only way to survive seeing Dexter Morgan clearly is to leave. The show has been canceled and revived and expanded across 3 spin-offs now, and there's a Dexter Resurrection series in production as of my writing this, with new cast and a new premise. I'll have more to say about all of that as it comes out. But what I find most interesting, looking back across the whole thing, is how consistent the central argument stays. Every version of Dexter, the Miami version, the Iron Lake version, the prequel version in Original Sin, is a story about the same core problem. A person who can't be fully known, and what that costs both them and the people who try. The close calls are the plot. The cost is the meaning. And taken together across all the seasons, they add up to something that's genuinely worth sitting with on a quiet night like this one. There's a future video I want to do about the people around Dexter, Rita, Deb, Harry, Harrison, Hannah, and what the show is actually saying through all of them. The human wreckage that surrounds a man like Dexter isn't background, it's the argument. It's the thing the show keeps making and keeps dressing up in thriller clothes so you can watch it without flinching too hard. But that's for another evening. For now, wherever you are tonight, in bed, on the sofa, headphones in, the world quiet around you, I hope this was a comfortable way to spend a few hours. Dexter's the kind of show that rewards this kind of slow, detailed attention. The close calls aren't just plot mechanics. They're the show making an argument over and over about what it costs to live 2 lives and what happens to the people who are standing nearby when those lives finally intersect. If you enjoyed tonight, feel free to subscribe or leave a comment. I genuinely enjoy hearing which moments are the ones that stick with people, which close calls they remember most clearly, which seasons they felt the tension most. My answer, for what it's worth, is Season 7. The Laguertu investigation, Isaac in the apartment, Speltzer's warehouse, all of it running simultaneously, is the season that most made me feel like the show understood how its own mechanism worked and was deliberately stress testing every part of it. But that's just me. The dark passenger for tonight can rest. Stay safe. Sweet dreams.